The Indie Writers Club podcast is sponsored by Pro Writing Aid. Pro Writing Aid has been my go-to tool for revising and refining my writing since my first book. Built by writers for writers, it's more than just a grammar and spell checker. Pro Writing Aid helps you enhance your story's pacing, plot, characters, settings, and more. It can even provide on-demand developmental feedback on your entire manuscript with its new manuscript analysis and virtual beta reader tools. Get ahead of the competition by heading to prowritingaid.com, sign up for free or use the code IWC15 for a 15% discount off annual subscriptions.
It's the Indie Writers Club with Cara Clare and James Blatch. A place to relax, chat, learn and vent about life as an independent author. Get episode alerts and links at indiewritersclub.com. Now, here's Cara and James.
Hello and welcome to the Indie Writers Club. My name is James Blatch.
And I am Cara Clare. How are you, James Blatch?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. Having a sort of fairly busy day, and tomorrow is the Judgment Day. Is Judgment Day tomorrow? Do you know that? Not that one.
God! Thought the Rapture was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, for the Kindle Storyteller Award. So, oh my goodness, I'm really looking forward to the discussion, but it's going to be a difficult one too.
So this is where you all get together in a room and
over a lunch, I would say.
Okay.
Literary lunch.
Literary lunch.
In a secret location. In fact, it's so secret we haven't been told where it is yet. So
really?
Hopefully someone's booked a restaurant. I've really enjoyed reading those books. They've been quite varied. I say we've had sort of I call it cozy mystery, much more Agatha Christie, which I suppose we would now call as cozy mystery, but it is set in that era. A very sort of Agatha Christie style book with quite a big cast, which Agatha Christie sometimes did, like Her Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile. Quite a cast of characters in that one. That was really enjoyable. Izzy Bromley's. I mean, I'm just going to say they're all really enjoyable. I'm not going to give anything away. So I probably shouldn't have said that, but I enjoyed them all. Izzy Bromley's a sort of almost modern feminist women's fiction story about a housewife who goes on strike. And then a crime thriller from Jason Dalglish, a very safe pair of hands, and giving that police procedure, which is, I think, harder than it looks. It looks easy when you look at a police procedure on TV and you read it. But I suspect you've got a lot of strings holding you. You're on the keyboard.
Yeah, I've got a crime series that I've been working on for a long time, a police procedural, and I just can't get it finished because there are so many threads. There are so many things. I'm a perfectionist as well. And even if it doesn't end up in the story, I want to know the actual science behind whether something is plausible and what would actually happen in terms of how those steps would be followed. And I've stopped and started it so many times that I've just given up now.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to talk to Jason about whether he starts the story knowing everything. We should imagine that's kind of how people plot books generally. But I have spoken to a couple of crime authors who just start the story and they're not sure who the murderer is.
I'm sure somebody in our Patreon Q&A, I'm sure it was in there, said they didn't know who the killer was. They just started writing. And then, I mean, that's incredible. I don't know how that would even work. That's a really special brain.
Okay, look, with this episode, we're going to talk a bit about where we are, the state of kind of traditional publishing versus indie publishing, the crossover and all the rest of it. And it's been prompted by a couple of things. One of them is quite a fun thing, which is there's always rumors swirling out around Taylor Swift. I mean, the Swifties, and I count myself as a Swiftie, they listen to every little conversation, every little Instagram post, every turn of phrase in an interview, looking for Easter eggs, pointing at things that are going to happen. Now, some of it's completely just imaginary, but actually Taylor does have a history of planting little hints about a new album reveal, etc., etc. So
I just want to interrupt to say that anybody listening, do not underestimate how much of a Taylor Swift fan James is. When we were in the pub last week, we were boring the two people at the table who were not Taylor Swift fans with our enthusiasm.
I don't even know why we're at the table with two people who are not.
I actually am not sure because it was on the day the album came out, wasn't it?
Yes. I said, what did you all think of the album?
And they were just looking at us blankly.
Yeah. But somebody a few people were talking about this, but there's a woman has posted on TikTok and put this together fairly accurately with evidence that she is now utterly convinced that Taylor Swift is self-publishing poetry on
Yes.
Amazon.
When you sent me that, I went, of course, James. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then I actually watched the video. And I have to say, I left quite convinced because so her main argument was the most recent book of poetry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the fact that it had lines in there that were directly related to or from or referring to songs from the new album. And she had tracked, when this book was published, and it was uploaded about 4 days before the album came out. So that was her kind of proof. And, I can't remember the nitty gritty of which lines and words and things were the ones that she thought were taken out. But I'm sure you do.
Sweet and Vanilla Perfume, Sharp and Serene was the giveaway line that's directly linked to the album before the album came out.
Yes.
And the name is Willow Bowery, which my daughter was explaining to me is the name of a ex and a collaborator, or a pseudonym used on the album when he collaborated with her early on. So it seemed like an odd choice. I thought it's possible that it's him, but my daughter is much more involved in all of this than I am, doesn't think it is. But anyway, the point is, it's possible. I mean, of course, the book is now a #1 bestseller. It's in the top couple of thousand in the Amazon store in America. For a book of poetry, that's not bad. It reminds me a little bit of Being John Malkovich. Did you ever watch that film?
No, I didn't, actually.
So in Being John Malkovich, this guy who's, in his case, it was puppetry, but it was basically an art form that is never going to make money or be mainstream and be very niche. Frankly, poetry is obviously hugely mainstream and hugely part of our culture, but is not commercial fiction. It's not going to make anyone rich. Famously doesn't make people rich. But in Being John Malkovich, he somehow inhabited John Malkovich's body, and then John Malkovich took up puppetry, and it became a global sensation. Suddenly everyone was doing puppetry and stuff. So it sort of feels like poetry may get that same kick from Taylor Swift. I mean, she's a lyricist, obviously, which is, songwriting is poetry. Not exactly, but, very closely related.
Yeah, and I think poetry is one of those things that has thrived under self-publishing, so it's not going to make people money, but actually the people who are making big money from poetry at the moment are the people who are self-publishing it, and they're doing things like they're doing the TikTok videos of them reading the poetry out, and that's actually something that's making it really popular. But in terms of Taylor Swift, okay, so if you were Taylor Swift, why would you self-publish this poetry? I suppose you might not actually. The second she approached a publisher, they wouldn't want her to do it under a pen name, because the only reason they would want to publish a book of poetry by Taylor Swift would be if they could publish it as a book of poetry by Taylor Swift. So from a creative point of view, I can kind of understand it, because you might just actually want to get this out there, but she's not concerned with whether it sells or not. But I don't know. Can I imagine Taylor sitting down and uploading it to KDP? I don't know.
I mean, well, I mean, sort of can. She's a modern creator, and it's absolutely not beyond her to use this as an outlet that she doesn't particularly want to be. I mean, I think I said this to you in the pub, listening to the album. For me, having seen the Eras tour, know enough about that business to be absolutely dumbfounded with how they put that tour on. And at the center of it is this 30-something woman who is the circus master, and that's an incredibly pressured and stressful job. However much she puts people around her to try and make sure she's protected from it. But when you listen to that album, it was almost like my daughter journals to survive. She journals for her mental health. It was like Taylor Swift journaling to survive the Eras tour. That's what the lyrics sounded like on the first couple of tracks. Obviously, there's some love stuff there as well. Love stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me that the more tortured stuff, and from Tortured Poets Society, of her albums, that she has another outlet for that. And there's a famous clip of her where someone said to her, lots of people have very personal things, and they'll sneak some of that stuff into their lyrics, when breakups and stuff, how do you do it? She says, everything's on my album. Everything that happens to me is on my album. There's I don't hold anything, but I don't hide anything. If I'm going to lash out at somebody and call them what they are, it'll be on my album. But she's always been somebody who's published her feelings that way. So, I mean, the more prosaic answer here is it's a diehard fan who's just slightly ahead of the game. Because one of the books is called Tortured Poets, I think. And
however, like the timeline from it, I don't know, do they release, albums ahead of time for people to listen to, like
Not
fans and
her
things?
album.
I wouldn't have thought they would.
No, she was on Graham Norton. She was on Graham Norton last week, a day before the album came out, and somebody in the audience said when they played a bit of the track, and Graham and Taylor and the other people were listening to it, it was silence in the studio because they couldn't play it because it was not out. They didn't have it. It wasn't out yet.
Really?
So they had to. They all sit on the sofa pretending they were listening to it.
So that the timeline of it. I don't actually understand how somebody would have that line from that album that hasn't been released, that nobody has seen, that had to be written at least a week before the album came out. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to be published.
I mean, there are leaks. People do have to know. You can't put an album together by yourself. So, it's possible. But anyway, so that's the first thing, is that it might be a bit like J.K. Rowling is secretly, most people don't know, one of the biggest independent publishers in the UK because she has the ebook rights to Harry Potter. Yeah. And that turns over, we can only imagine. I mean, they're constantly in the top 10. So.
And that was a very, very early decision, wasn't it? Ebooks were a very early thing.
I think it was the fact that ebooks weren't even on the horizon and weren't mentioned in the contract. And when ebook became a thing, she just realized that she had inherited, she hadn't given away the ebook rights, therefore she had them.
Yeah, I mean, at the time I worked at, when ebooks started to become a thing, I was working at Cambridge University Press, and my boss, Rufus, said, and we were in a tiny, tiny department called Digital Business Development. And my boss, Rufus, said, ebooks, everybody, this is going to be the next big thing. I promise you they're going to happen. And the kind of big high up people at the press went, yeah, of course they are. All right. So they gave him this little department. And our job was literally going through the CUP archives, calling up whoever the point of contact was for the authors of these really old books. And a lot of the time it was the spouse of somebody who died, either calling them up or writing them letters to say, basically, if we don't hear back from you, we're going to assume you're okay with us publishing the ebook versions of these books. And that was the way that they went about it, because it obviously wasn't in anyone's contracts, the same way that AI isn't in people's contracts at the moment. And then you have to be one of those authors who's aware of things and be on the front foot and go to your publisher and be like, well, actually, no, I'm keeping those rights. Yeah. Or I want this written in, or however you go about phrasing it.
I think modern publishing contracts talk about publishing in any possible conceived or yet to be conceived format here on planet Earth or on other planets within our universe. I mean,
they do. And I mean, I think most people would advise like trying to fight back against that and being quite specific. But that's another conversation. But this whole thing kind of leads us into, doesn't it? The other video that I saw this week, which was Richard Osman talking about publishing. And I actually love Richard Osman, so it's not a kind of, don't want to, slag him off. That's not what this is about. It was on what's his podcast called? The Rest of Entertainment.
The Rest is Entertainment.
And he was talking about the fact that publishers now like people to have a public profile, a social media presence. And he was kind of saying that he disagreed and saying that actually, the most important thing is just getting out there. And the example he used was that when he does a book tour around the UK, that's more valuable than having a social media presence because he gets to meet people. And he was kind of saying to new writers, if a publisher says to you that you need to have a social media presence, I would say to you, that's nonsense. And I kind of thought, because he's coming at it from quite a privileged position. I mean, there's the question of whether he would have been published at all if he wasn't Richard Osman, for starters. He had a public presence already, or persona, before he was published. And also, if you actually go down into the numbers, we all know that doing a book signing does not equate to enough book sales. Like, that might feel lovely. You might meet some readers, you might chat to people and turn them into fans. But actually, numbers on a spreadsheet, those are not the sales that are keeping you going. And part of the big trad machine is doing events and keeping public profile up and doing PR stuff with bookshops, all of that kind of thing. But in terms of what actually makes them the money, it's online sales, predominantly still online sales. So of course, I mean, it's not really much of a step further than a few years ago, they started wanting celebrities. I think Greg James, the Radio 1 presenter, wrote a children's book. I was like, why has Greg James written a picture book? Well, it's because all the mums doing the school run listened to the Greg James show, because I think at the time I can't remember if he was on the morning or the evening. But so they're already aware of him, they're going to be more likely to buy his book. And that's been a thing for a very long time. So this is kind of just publishers moving even further than that and saying, well, actually, you've proven to us that you're not a risk because you've got 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 TikTok followers. So we know that you can sell books. So it makes you kind of a really sound investment.
Yeah. I mean, I used to listen regularly to the Rest is Entertainment. I sort of stopped listening for a bit. So I do find Marina Hyde, she's funny and witty and very witty to read, but I find her a little bit Cheltenham Ladies College first 11 hockey team captain. Oh gosh, that is so funny. Anyway, parking that sounds quite rude. But Richard Osman, he's very, very good and addictive listening when he's talking about, behind the scenes on quiz shows and showbiz and how stuff gets commissioned. But when he talks about publishing, he's at his worst. He has a very blinkered view of publishing. I think I said to you when we were discussing this on WhatsApp, it's like getting financial advice from someone who's won the lottery. It's his experience in publishing is nothing like everyone else's experience in publishing. When you talk about publishing, when you talk about a writer, so for instance, a few months ago, they had a question in, how much say do writers have over the price of their book? Now, I would say the vast majority of books on Amazon are self-published. The vast majority of books are independently published and operated by either very small independent press or the author themselves. And so they have total control over the pricing. And this is within the remit of what the platforms allow. So you could discuss that. However, the minority of writers who are published by a big publishing company, they have less control. But of course, Richard Osman said it the other way around. He said, no, you don't have any control over the price of your book. You can't control that. That's very much a matter for the publishing company. And there may have been an aside at the end of that saying, I suppose if you're self-published, maybe you could adjust the price of your book. And so his viewpoint is of this already, as you say, celebrity author taken on who just is asked to turn up to a tent to talk to the middle class in Hay, rather than the rest of us who are at the front line of digital marketing and understand what you need to do to sell your books. And it's not, I'm afraid, pressing the flesh and hay. That's not going to sell many books.
Yeah. And I mean, that might not be the way that it should be. Like, we might all like to think that, in an ideal world, you can just have pure talent and you can, send that off to a publisher and they're going to recognize your brilliance and they're going to go, yes, I believe in you. And they're going to publish this debut author and it's going to be massive. That rarely happened even before, self-publishing was a thing. I've met with trad authors before who've had their contracts terminated after book one. They thought they were going to be writing a 6-book series. Book one flopped because initial kind of testing, marketing didn't really have the response that the publisher wanted. So after book one, they said, actually, we don't want the rest. We can't publish the rest. And, contract ended. So it's kind of always been the case that publishers really, they're there to make money. They're a money making organization. Yeah. So, and listening to him talk, it just kind of, I don't know, I think we always forget, don't we? Because we're so immersed in indie publishing and we know just how, smart and adept and multifaceted you have to be as an indie author. We kind of forget that there's still such a huge subset of people who view indie as the less good option and who still kind of really do see trad as the pinnacle of what you should be achieving, and that you should be doing that as an artist, which means not flogging your wares. Like, it's seen as a little bit icky still to go onto social media and talk about your book. There's kind of this strange, ethereal notion that true artists just sell their books, through the value of their work, which just isn't the case.
Yeah, it's fascinating because they haven't met the people we've met. They haven't had the conversations we have in our community. Big romance authors who I know whose only trad deal is on their print version. They would absolutely be snapped up by every publisher on the planet, some of the size of some of these authors, that they only give their print deal off. And that's almost a loss leader for them. Yes, it makes money, but it's their name and presence in shops and airports. It's drive sales for their ebooks, which is where they make all their money. And in some cases, millions of dollars a year. And there's Louise Ross in the UK. Hopefully see Barry Hutchins to writing as well, our fellow Jugs. You have the big authors who could walk into a publishing company and write the terms of their contract, but don't. They don't do that, Richard. They continue to self-publish. It's not a second best option. It's the first best option for them.
And I've had conversations with a few friends lately who are massively successful, and they've both said, well, they're at the point where the offer from trad would have to be phenomenally huge in order for them to consider it. Like the advance that they offered, because they now know the lifetime value of their books, how much they can make from their books. And also not just about the money, the control. Like we've said before, we control our pricing, we control our covers, we control what narrator we choose. We,
and deadlines.
We have deadlines. We have control over all of those things. So, I've got quite a few friends who have been spoken to by trad, and they've just said, but you're never going to make me an offer that would actually tempt me into doing that. And actually, one of our friends, Sacha Black, was interviewed at this year's London Book Fair, I think just after Richard Osman. So on, I think it was on ITV News, and they talked to him and then they talked to her. And I was like, I know who out of the two of those people has more publishing knowledge.
Yes. Yeah.
And hands down, it is Sacha.
I mean, first of all, I just want to say something about celebrity authors, because I know a lot of people have a downer on it, and it can be frustrating when you're trying to ply your wares and somebody seems to get a book deal because of who they are rather than the quality of their writing. But I don't think that's the case. First of all, I think, there's ways of making writing high quality. We can't have it both ways. We want fiction, the publishing industry to be commercial, available to us to be able to ply our wares and make money and become wealthy from that. Then that's what it is. It's a commercial industry. And of course, if you're running a publishing company and Princess, Catherine says she wants to write children's books, of course you're going to say absolutely yes, and good luck to them. Everyone finds a way of eking out an earning, whether you're a celebrity or not. I don't suppose Radio 1 DJs earn that much, so they're not like multi-millionaires.
But I think as well, a lot of celebrities are creative people. Like if you're talking about presenters or actors, or they are creative people. Some of them have been to stage show. It's the same. A singer ends up being an actor, that kind of thing. It's not necessarily that they're just doing it for a purely commercial reason, but if you've got a platform and you've always wanted to write a book, a little bit how Hugh Laurie performed a jazz album, when he was on House, and it was like the absolute pinnacle of his career because he was incredibly famous on this huge American TV show, and he released one or two blues jazz albums, which, if he was a normal guy and he wanted to record that music, no one would have given him the time of day. But why wouldn't you? If somebody gives you the opportunity and that's something you've always wanted to do, then of course you would. So it can feel a bit difficult. And I think actually I do feel probably most sorry for children's authors, because it happens a lot in children's, and I think it's so much harder for them to get the visibility, and children's books rely so heavily on presence in bookstores for actually getting their books out in front of people. But yeah, like you said, we can't have it both ways. We can't want them to be commercially successful organizations, because actually we want them to succeed. We're not down on trad as in down with trad, everybody should self-publish. I think what we're moving towards, which is what we're going to discuss next, is the kind of model that we've all been wanting for a long time, which is where indies are taken seriously. The author has more control over their business, over their rights, and over what they want their business to look like.
Yeah. Which brings us on to our next sort of signpost point on this discussion of where we are with indie and trad. And that is a Substack by a woman called Kelly Beck, which was published at the beginning of October. And it's The State of Traditional Publishing is the name of the Substack. But what she's basically saying is that in a short period of time, like 2 years, she shows a load of advice being given to authors a couple of years ago, where authors said, should I self-publish first? I want a traditional contract. Should I self-publish first? And the answer was definitely no. And agents warning people that if you've self-published your book is published. Therefore, you can't then go to a traditional publisher and get your book published because you've published it. And other people saying, well, they're not going to look at you if you're self-published. 2 years later, the advice is switching to be self-published, prove you can do it, build a platform, have an audience, have readers, then you might stand a chance of getting a traditional contract, because that's now what the publishing companies are looking for. Proven success, proven readership, followers on social media. All the things that Richard says you don't necessarily need to do, we would say you absolutely do need to do. And, I started a publishing company. Vinci Books was started on this basis. I never wanted to look at the first two pages of somebody's manuscript and say, oh, I think you're a brilliant writer. I'd like to commission this series from you. I wanted to see evidence that they could write, that the reviews were good, because I trust the audience more than anyone else, that they were getting 4.5+ stars out of a decent number of reviews, that they had a decent following. That was enough for me. And we've built a publishing company based on that. It's interesting, of course, that traditional publishing is now coming around to that a few years later, but it's taken them a long time.
I mean, one of the things that Kelly's quoted in her article was an agent posting on Twitter in 2019 saying, please don't lie in your query about being self-published by a small traditional press. When I research you, it doesn't matter how amazing your manuscript is, I'll reject you and we'll both be disappointed. So the implication is, if you've self-published, don't lie about it and pretend that you were actually published by a small publisher. You need to admit that you're self-published, in which case you won't be chosen.
Whereas now, if that woman takes a writer into a publishing company, they're very likely to be asked, what's their following like?
Yes.
What's their standing? And that will be based on their self-published history.
Yeah.
So that's how quickly that changed.
Later down in the article, she then quotes another agent, which was from September this year, who specifically says that they're looking for horror, book club and upmarket fiction and indie projects. And somebody asked in the comments, what constitutes as an indie project? I don't know what that means. And the agent replies, self-published. So they've actually said that they are specifically looking for indie books. Kelly also breaks down the rise in romance authors being taken on by trad, and that this year in 2025, in particular, it seems to have just gone crazy. And she quotes about 7 different authors. And on top of that, I could name probably another 4 or 5 at least who have self-published. Some of them even have just the pre-order listed. And they do so well with pushing TikTok towards that pre-order that it's snapped up by trad before it's even actually gone live on Amazon.
Which is smart.
It is smart. I mean, I've been contacted by trad publishing editors saying, what projects have you got coming up? Is there anything you'd like to share with me? And I know lots of friends who are getting contacted by editors, particularly in the romance space, who are looking at authors who've got a platform and saying, what are you doing next? What could you write for me? So it's almost how nonfiction works, which has always been publishers kind of look for somebody who has a status in the non-fiction space. And then they say to them, we'd like you to write a book about blah, blah, blah. Would you be up for doing that? So it's kind of almost moving towards that.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, in publishing for 100 years, they've guessed. They've tried to guess who's going to be successful. And they've tried to narrow it down. There's these things like these academies that very prestigious academies, you get onto this training program, and almost everybody who writes
like the Faber Academy and things
Academy,
like that. Yeah.
Almost all of them get a traditional deal as a result of that. But I know quite a few of those academy authors, and I've seen their books come and go, and I've seen them come and go over the years not being successful. Now, something, 1 in 20 blows up. That's how traditional publishing has worked for that century, is that 1 in 20 blows up and others just fall by the wayside. But if you could narrow that down a bit, if you could start with some data to show that there's an audience here, to show that the books get well reviewed, doesn't that make it more commercial? In any other industry, there'd be no question that you go down that route, that would be the way you do it. It's taken traditional publishing 10 years to get over themselves about, well, self-publishing, we look down at self-publishing, therefore we'll have nothing to do with it. Now it's taken them 10 years later to work out, well, there's all the data that takes the guesswork out of it, or at least narrows it down.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for us either as authors, because people kind of go, oh God, but that means I've got to try and, actually push my book before I publish it. And that sounds awful, but actually it can save you so much time, because if you write your book and focus on pushing it on whatever platform you're going to do that, whether you're going to do that on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and then you do get snapped up by trad, great. If that's your end goal, if that's what you really, really want, then great. But I guarantee you that will have happened in a much shorter time frame than if you spent 2 years querying and sending out this book and then you end up getting rejected, or then you end up getting the trad deal. But it's been a 2-year process. It kind of, if you want to make a career out of this, it shortens that for you. And it's like, and then if this book isn't a success, okay, I'll move on to the next one. And you're saving yourself all that time, because it really, I think people underestimate how long the querying process takes from when you start sending out to agents to when you actually, the book is on the shelves. I mean, I was talking to an author, I don't know if I mentioned this the other week, who is already trad published. They're writing their next book and they're giving it to their editor, around about now. And they probably won't see that on the shelves until late 2027. And for us, that's like, whoa, that's such a long time. If that was your debut novel, if you've never done that before, it's going to be years.
Yeah.
And I've been in a situation where I've gone through right to the point where I'm talking to, I've got an agent, I'm talking to a publisher, and they've been all the way along. And this is over the course of a year, all the way along. They're saying, this book is fantastic. We love it. And this was one of my very, very early YA books. And then it got right, down to the wire. And they went, actually, don't think so. We're not really that keen on the ending. And I was like, well, we can tweak the ending. And it was kind of just an excuse. They just had obviously decided it wasn't going to be something that they thought was going to be successful enough. But that was a whole year that took just to get to that point. And even if they'd said yes at that point, it then would have taken so much longer to actually get it out there. So I don't think it's the negative thing that people think it is, but the difficulty is that some people do just want to write. They really don't like marketing. They're not good at marketing. That's not why they're writing a book. So maybe if we, go back to what Richard Osman was saying, he's thinking about the people who feel quite disheartened because all they want to do is be an author and they don't want to run a business and they don't want to learn Facebook ads and they don't want to do TikTok.
Yeah. And it's such a better option than all those things you just outlined. I know I'm writing a series of welcome emails and sort of redoing the welcome email sequence for SPF, for Learn Self-Publishing, and sort of setting out that framework. And I'm not writing them into, you're in the right place, join us. I'm writing it, this is what's involved in being a self-published author, just so you come in here with your eyes open. But it is so much the better option. I've just looked up the figures. Also, I know somebody who got a 6-figure publishing deal in 2016, 17, around then. I think it was 16 because the first book was published. It was 17. The first book was published in 2019. So it took 2 years from getting this 6-figure deal for 3 books. And the first one was published in 19. The second one was published in 21. And the third one is not out. Now, I don't know what happened. I haven't spoken to them for a while. But let's say they got £100,000. A 6-figure deal, I'm assuming, is not going to be 999,000. It's probably going to be like 100, 120, something like that, which is a huge advance and a big deal. And it got a press release and it got mentioned in the trade press and stuff. Well, if you think the second book came out, so that's 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, it's 5 years. Divide 100 by 5. That's £20,000 a year that person got as an author. And that's probably tailed away. I don't know if the books earned out. I don't think they did. So, you tell me where we're now 10 years later, that's not 20,000 a year anymore. That's £10,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And so that big trad deal, which felt like she's right at the top of the tree to get that, because everyone else is trying to get, and they're not barely being offered anything, like £5,000-10,000 advances. And that offer was amazing. And yet has not turned out to be a better option, I think, than self-publishing and writing good genre fiction and producing a book every 6 months.
Yeah, because then you're in a position where you've had this advance, fantastic. You've probably spent that. That's probably gone. Then you're writing book 2. Book 1 probably hasn't earned out yet. And you've still got to deliver them 2 more books. And then your motivation's gone. You're sort of wanting to write the next thing, but you can't write the next thing. And yeah, it sounds a lot. And that was why, I kind of backed out of going down any trad discussions earlier in the year, because it sounds amazing when you first think about that 6-figure number. And then when you actually drill down into it, you think, well, hang on, like over the lifetime of this book and over the series, because it wouldn't just be for 1 book, it would be for 3. Doesn't actually work out as that much. And like you say, you've got to earn out. So that's another thing a lot of people don't understand is that figure, you're not going to see any more money until your books have made back that money. That's why it's called an advance. You're getting paid in advance for copies that the publisher needs to sell in order for you to get any more. Yeah. And if you are, Richard Osman or whoever, then that's, much more likely to happen. But for a lot of authors, it doesn't happen.
And I don't even think it was the better option as a writer as well, because I think that process, let's take that example where you've got a 2 or 3 book commission and it takes 7 years. those 2 years of backwards and forwards on the manuscript of an editor who, knows everything, I suppose, and says, that's not quite right. Let's redo that. Let's rework this. Let's rework the ending. I don't think this is quite right. The first book did pretty well. The second book has not done well. So despite all of that backwards and forwards with an editor in the industry, they've now lost interest, I think, in their author. So probably why book 3 is never going to come out. Whereas actually, had you gone down the indie route, you would have learnt on the job with your relationship with readers. You would have been writing and producing a book every 6 months. Now, maybe the first 3 books weren't as good as your first book, but by the third, fourth book, you're writing keenly attuned books. You're loving writing them. You're loving being a writer. You've got a relationship with readers. You're becoming a better writer from it. I think that makes you a better writer than working with an industry expert one-on-one who's got an idea in their mind of what the book should be, which actually sounds like, my idea of hell, writing a book for somebody else, not for myself.
Yeah, I mean, one of the conversations I had years ago with a publisher was about taking on my women's fiction. And at the time, it was already out there. It was self-published. I was already getting like 4.5, 5-star reviews on all my books. They'd done really well. And we got through to, the end discussion stages. And then the editor that I was talking about was like, so what we really want to do is merge books 1 and 2 and remove a bunch of this content and maybe turn that into a prequel or something, and then merge 3 and 4, and then we'll create a new book 3 out of what was going to be in your proposed books 5 and 6 or something like that. And I was like, but why? Yeah. They're already selling as they are. Book 1 is, and then it started to go even deeper than that in terms of like, and we'd want more of this. We'd want some more flashback scenes. And I was like, that's turning it into a completely different book. That's not the book that I've written. And the reason was this particular publisher does a lot of deals with the works and places like that. And they really needed the books to be about 95 to 100,000 words.
Right.
I was like, that's your reason. So it's not even actually about the story. It's not because you've read it and said, actually, these things are really going to make the book better. It's because you've read it and then you've gone, it's great, it's fantastic, but it's only 65,000 words. So we need to just buff it up with some more content and kind of butcher the series. And I couldn't think of anything worse than going back and doing that to something that I've written that was, be bad enough if I'd already done it and it was not published. But the fact that it was already self-published and readers were already loving it as it was, I just didn't see the merit in it. I didn't see any reason to do that. So I said no, politely.
Good. Okay. So that's the state of the industry.
Yeah,
Go
so
indie.
we've solved that.
Solved that. Go indie. The next week we're going to...
Sorry, final thing that I was going to say is I think regardless of anything else, even if you do it under a pen name, if you indie publish your first book, even if you then decide it's not for you and you're going to go down the trad route, you've kind of got nothing to lose. It's going to teach you so much. You're going to learn so much about the industry, about how this stuff works, and about your skill as a writer. You might as well do it. Even if you do it under a pen name and then you end up never doing anything with that pen name, it's worth a try.
Yeah. And, you need, it's more than worth a try. I think the point of this article now is you almost need that. You almost need to have proved yourself in this environment. And why would you not? Why would a traditional publisher want to take a risk on someone who's never done a single tweet or run a single Facebook ad or done any sort of marketing, has no proven success in writing? Why do you take someone like, 2016, I think when we started the self-publishing show, one of the first guests on was Bella Andre. She was the first person I'd heard of who was offered like a $50,000 advance to write a romance series. And she turned her laptop around, showed a spreadsheet of how much she was earning per month with her romance books. And she signed a $1 million deal with them, which I thought was also very cynical of the industry, because that's how they basically rip off authors, give them lowballing all the time. And she knew how much her books were making, and they knew that as well. And as soon as they knew she knew, the offer became a 7-figure one, and she signed a 7-figure traditional publishing deal to write romance for them.
Yeah. So if you want to do this as a career, indie is the way that you need to go first.
Yeah, you go indie. Okay.
Yeah.
Next week, we are going to be talking about using AI to be your personal publishing assistant, because I know someone who's done that, and I've been watching them closely, and I've been very impressed with how that works. And I want to know how it works, so we're going to get them on. We're going to talk about that next week. We always use AI to answer questions, but you can train it to really bring some structure and purpose to your marketing, make your life a lot easier. I think we need to be deep diving on this because it's the next.
Yeah, and I think this
working.
is one of the areas as small business owners, which is essentially what we are, people who are solopreneurs trying to do everything on our own. A lot of us are starting off as a side hustle because we've got a day job that we're trying to do, and we're trying to like, these are the things that can accelerate your career. And I've read a couple of articles on this week, so that's really good timing.
Yeah. Good. Okay, that'll be next week. Wish me luck with my judging tomorrow, and
Good
going to see
luck.
Hamilton tomorrow night.
Oh, I'm excited to know what you think of it. Really excited.
We're in row C, right in the middle, so I can't fall asleep because
You
the
will
act
not
will be
fall
me.
asleep. If you fall asleep, we're not friends anymore.
3 hours.
It's worth it every second.
Like I say, as long as it's not anti-English.
Enjoy.
All right. See you next week. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Support the podcast and get exclusive access by joining our Patreon. From just $1 an episode, you'll be invited to our Discord server, where the weekly discussion continues every day. And our 2 top tiers include a monthly live Q&A with James and Cara. Head to indiewritersclub.com/support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. We'll see you next Friday.
The Indie Writers Club podcast is sponsored by Pro Writing Aid. Built by writers for writers, Pro Writing Aid doesn't just check spelling and grammar. It helps you enhance your story's pacing, plot, characters, settings, and more. Now it can even provide on-demand developmental feedback on your entire manuscript with its manuscript analysis and virtual beta reader tools. Give your writing a competitive advantage by heading to prowritingaid.com. You can also sign up for free or use the code IWC15 for a 15% discount off annual subscriptions.